Arjun, welcome to our show. Today we are going to talk about the future, real future. And especially I want to talk today about post-pandemic world. You know, a lot of people, especially our alumni, feel responsible, feel concerned, they want to make the difference, but they are looking for ideas, suggestion, how they can create a better world. So, what do you think of the role technology should play going forward?
So I think as we have seen during the pandemic itself, technology is playing a very important role. The vaccine has come out in less than a year because of technology. You're able to do online learning for children who aren't going to school because of technology. You're able to have companies continue to work through Google Meet, Zoom, Teams, whatever applications are there, again, because of technology. So I think technology has played an important role and will continue to play a very important role, especially when you look at how this is going to impact, different industries going forward. So I would really think I can break it up at a very broad level. There are industries that have been growing through the pandemic that will actually grow very quickly after this. And those are things like AR, VR, IT services, online education. Those are industries that are going to grow. So everyone's technology is going to play a very important role. Then there are industries that are going to have to adapt. Medical is one where, I think the numbers that I know are before the pandemic, 2% of the people were doing telemedicine consults. During the pandemic, it's up to some 45, 50, maybe more. Post-pandemic, people estimate it'll be 20 to 25%. So doctors, clinics, hospitals, all have to, and insurance companies, the whole eco-health system has to adopt to this. And just think of the role technology will have to play in this as we go forward. So, people have to get used to the fact that you may not need to consult a doctor, especially if you're far away. It might be convenient to just do a teleconsult if you can, unless the doctor feels a visit is important. And doctors have to adapt themselves to be able to give you relevant, good advice through a teleconsult rather than having to see you, just as an example. So there'll be other industries where they won't be threatened, but they'll need to adapt to continue to exist and grow. And then there are a whole set of high-touch industries like transportation, retail, hospitality, where they'll have to change the way they do things. They'll have to adapt. Now, how they adapt, what they do, how they're going to emerge in the future, what kind of model is going to be the winner is something I don't know. I don't know those industries, but people in those industries need to think about it and see what they're going to do. But again, I feel whatever they do, technology will be very important.
So let's go back to the health. Because health is something we both know is the biggest challenge today. COVID has shown us that our lifestyle is problematic. It's a serious concern, and a lot of people surprisingly are healthier than they used to be, which is impressive. People are taking care of their body, but we both know how our whole environment plays a major role. It's not just a physical environment, even our emotional state plays a major role. There are a lot of problems we are discovering around mental wellness right now. In fact, there is one company, I forgot, they are going to be unicorn very soon, I just heard, and they are working purely in mental wellness space. So the problem is huge. So since this episode is more targeted to people who want to build the next generation company, I think if you and me can go a little deeper and really talk about the kind of things our people can do around health will be very interesting. So since you talk about teleconsult, is it there or is it still in the infancy, in your opinion?
No, it's there. It's already, in different countries, the requirements are different. So in a country like the US, you expect a doctor to be sitting behind the terminal when you call. In a country like India, we don't have enough doctors. So the doctor can't be sitting behind a terminal.
Right.
So we have to find a way of the application becoming, so you've got to asynchronously ask all the questions, capture all the data, and once you've got the data, then connect with the doctor. Gone are the days in India where you could go to a doctor and he would spend hours with you and draw your symptoms out from you, right? Your parents probably, or my parents, that was the way doctors used to work.
Yeah.
Now,
I remember.
now they don't. They don't have the time because there are not enough doctors. Too many patients. And plus they've got testing devices that give them the information that they need. Right. But think of the patient doesn't get the mental satisfaction that he or she used to get earlier. So that change has taken place. We accept it. Right. We may not be as happy or mentally satisfied. It's going to change even further. Right. Our kids are not, I know in India there's a shortage of doctors. So they need to spend less and less time per patient, even with chronic patients. So you're going to see them depending on technology. So for example, let's say if you're a heart patient, you go to the doctor, even here, he does whatever tests he does. He looks at them and then he says, see me after 6 weeks. Okay. Now, unless you have an emergency in those 6 weeks, he doesn't know what happened to you. Till you go back again and then he does your vitals or whatever he has to do. Now, if I could, let's just take blood pressure, temperature, maybe those are the two things, and monitor them during those 6 weeks when I'm away, so that when I go back, the doctor has that data. He'll be in a much better position to prescribe something for me than the way it exists today. And so technology is going to provide him that kind of benefit. In some countries where you have a shortage of doctors, technology is actually going and using AI to try and predict based on the patient's questions, the patient's answers, what is the problem with the patient. It diagnoses, gives the diagnosis to the doctor. And in fact, the data I have is that it's saving doctors 30 to 70% of their time with the patient. So he or she can see more patients. So it's starting to happen. I'll give you an example that will probably be better understood because most people don't understand, what doctors do.
True. That's so true.
Yeah. But let me talk about higher education. And everyone understands higher education because they've been through college. So most of the people who are listening to this have probably been through college.
100%.
Now, what happens is everyone's got used to online education, right? First thing is, why would I enroll in a smaller university? If an IIT or a Harvard or an MIT decided that they could go online, why can't they get 2 million students?
True.
Why do they have
we
to
are
be
already
limited
talking to IITs about it.
Right. So why would a smaller engineering college, how would it survive?
True.
Because everyone would want to be enrolled with an IIT for the online course.
True.
So first thing is, see how it's going to change that ecosystem if it happens.
Education.
Second thing is, most people are going to work from home, right? So you need another room where you can put your sort of computer and stuff and not be disturbed while you're doing your online education. So homes are going to need to get bigger. People are going to want bigger homes. And so that's another thing that's going to change. The real estate market, where you're already seeing that in the US. Third thing is, when I've got to give content, why do I have to depend on American professors? I can get the content made by professors in India who speak English.
Absolutely.
So like we outsource software development, you're going to see content is also going to get outsourced. So all of a sudden that industry is going to change. So just, I'm just giving you some obvious changes that are likely to happen if we look at if that change happens in higher education. Right. So labs and all may not change. So, that's why I said, when you look at any industry and you say what's going to change, then look at whatever is going to change behind it and how it's going to impact different industries. And it's going to be interesting to see how that happens.
So I'll give an interesting example. When we talk about health, and when we were discussing about teleconsult 16 years ago, maybe 18 years ago, HP invited a bunch of entrepreneurs from Silicon Valley. I got the invitation, and they showed us this unbelievable show called, they used to call it Cool Town Technology. Do you remember that?
No, I don't.
So HP did major PR. They have invested, I believe, millions and millions of dollars building this experience. And the idea was is that this technology will be fitted in your car, and your mechanic will know before you know that your car is going to break down. Your car will tell you when to go, and that's the mechanic shop. And we are talking about early 2000. Now, I'm bringing that to humans, like people like you and me. With the sensors today we have and trackers we have, especially the new Apple Watch. It's not a plug for Apple Watch, but especially with new Apple Watch, it can do 6 to 7 of your biofeedback. I am a big fan of biofeedback. I even read few books around biofeedback, worked in that space, that what kind of data it can collect. However, even today, there are several things. Of course, the challenges of privacy, people are not willing to share data and all. I still don't see talk around or a conversation around interconnectedness of these biofeedback devices. I still don't see this cool town type thing that your doctor is calling, hey, Arjun, I see your insulin level going up. Why that's not happening?
Okay, so the first thing is the watches and all that you talk about don't have clinically relevant information. So in a way, the doctor doesn't want too many false alarms. But there are applications today, not on wearables. They will come on wearables very soon. That I don't know of any wearables today. But there are applications today where if the doctor defines the parameters, and let's say if your blood pressure goes above this, or if your glucose level goes above this, then I should get an alarm, right? That exists. So when you take, so, you know, there are companies that I know of that I'm involved with actually, that actually have when you're an inpatient and you're sent home, right? The doctor wants you to monitor yourself because in the US, for example, if you're back within 30 days with the same problem, the insurance doesn't pay for it. The hospital has to pay. Because they're assuming if the hospital releases you, then at least 30 days, you shouldn't come back with the same problem. So they are very keen to make sure that, so let's say I'm a surgical patient, I go home and I'm supposed to take my temperature. I take my temperature and it's 99, right? Now, 99, you and I would normally ignore it, ho jata hai, thermometer problem, whatever.
Yeah.
But the system knows you're a surgical patient. So the intelligent system will give a alarm to the doctor and give him a subset of your medical file. The doctor then can look at the more detailed medical file if he wants and decide whether to ignore it, call you to the hospital, or talk to you on the phone and say what's happened, what can you do, etc., etc. So that is already exists. Those alerts do exist. Implementation is taking time because you've got to integrate it with the hospital system, and different hospitals have different systems. And then you have certain systems who don't give you APIs, so you can't go in
and do that.
So it's a problem. Like in the financial world, I can't have one interface that talks to the New York Stock Exchange and Frankfurt Stock Exchange and London Stock Exchange. I have to have different interfaces.
True.
The same thing is true with hospitals and with imaging equipment. There are different interfaces. So there's an opportunity to create a black box that will make it compatible to all those systems. And it's much easier to do in healthcare because latency is important, but not ultra important, like it is in financial services, where if I want to do a trade, I can't wait 3 seconds for the trade to go to the exchange, but in a hospital environment, I can wait 3 seconds for a record to be converted, right? So the problem is a little less intense in this area. And I'm sure people are working on it, right? while, one thing is I'll define a standard, but by the time you define the standard, there are 15, 20 different formats already existing.
True.
So, you're going to see stuff like this start happening. And as it becomes more pervasive, you're going to have people getting access to all those records. If you're living in California, you have an accident in New York, the doctor there should be able to immediately get your records online.
So
right?
True.
Doesn't happen today. And that's where countries like India, where you don't have this standard set up, might be in a better position than countries like the US, because they can now define the standard, which is really what happened on mobile phones.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they had no, how do I put it?
We don't have any legacy.
Years ago, I was traveling. I think I was flying from London to Boston, and the person sitting next to me was a VP from Digital Equipment Corporation. I'm going back to the VAX days, VAX VMS. And Unix was just coming in as the standard. So the DEC people were having a lot of problems switching from what was a really good operating system, VAX, to a kind of a operating system like Unix that had a lot of issues, right? But they had to switch because that was the way the world was going. So he told me, he said, we have a saying going around Digital Equipment Corporation, that how was God able to create the world in 6 days? He said the only reason he could do it is because he didn't have an installed base.
Good one. Good one. That's a good one. I love it. That's a great analogy. So true. So true. Love it. I'm going to use it. No install base.
Yeah.
That's so true. So, coming back to the health data exchange, I had a similar kind of conversation, but you gave me a lot more fuel around that with Naveen Jain, because Naveen Jain is working with the technology around microbiome. He has a company called Viome, and he has almost several 100,000 people's microbiome data. Now, interesting thing about microbiome data is because it's RNA based. So it's very interesting, and especially COVID has taught us a lot about what can we do with RNA, because our earlier research was more around DNA, which is like in a way correlated, but there is still tremendous difference. And our COVID vaccine is completely based on RNA. So what other problems can we solve? So I think health data exchange, standardization can be a very interesting and can be very groundbreaking opportunity for our new entrepreneurs or even current entrepreneurs. How do we create those standards which are of global scale? And we can start with India. Now we have the Indian government is really very pro to the digitalization of things. So maybe adoption, as you said, no install base, so will be quicker. What do you think about that?
No, absolutely. And in fact, it's happening in India.
Oh, it's already happening.
Yeah, it's already happening.
Who is leading it?
The number of companies that are in the fray, they are all sort of quiet right now. I mean, the company that I am involved with is already doing that. They've already got some 8.5, 9 million people's digital health records on their database.
Wow.
So numbers in India are a little crazy, I mean, how it goes. Yeah. Hospital like King George Medical College is now a university in Lucknow, KGMC as we used to know it.
Yeah.
It has over 10,000 outpatients a day.
10,000?
So just think of 1,000 outpatients a day. So just think of what the amount of data you can collect from places like that. They actually destroy 1 million X-rays every year because they don't have place to store them. It is quite, in fact, because of the shortage of doctors in India. So just again, giving you the India example.
Yeah.
With the economy picking up, the number of patients coming into who can afford to come into the healthcare system and afford to pay whatever little expense there is, even the government healthcare system, is going up by 18% every year, or some number like that, on a pretty big base. But the number of doctors is only going up by 6%. And if I need new doctors, I have to invest today, I'll get them 10 years later.
True.
But the patients are going to keep going up for those 10 years. So already there's a shortage of doctors. So think of how bad the situation will be in the next few years. So there is a demand that technology come in and help reduce the patient-facing time that doctors are spending to do the diagnosis.
Mm-hmm. So,
Right.
Arjun, can we use AI now? There are a lot of smaller attempts, and I have invested into some companies too, smaller startups, but including the company doing some record scanning, X-ray scanning. I don't know where are they going. What I'm finding is that a lot of people have created AI as this big thing without thinking through the different business problems it can solve. So I'll give you one idea. Some company came to me 4 years ago and they wanted to build this stethoscope connected with your mobile phone. And then you don't need to go to the doctor. Doctor calls you and you just put it on your stomach, and then he can check all your vitals sitting wherever it is and then tell you what to do. And I believe the prediction with that will be far more accurate than the human doing it, because human can make mistakes. You and me both know, depending upon his mood or what is going on in his head. But when there is a machine involved, it's very binary. So do you see next 10 years, half of the problems we see doctors for will be treated by computers, by AI?
Yeah, I think actually, the new aims at Patna, All India Institute of Medical Sciences at Patna, they were the ones who pioneered telemedicine in India. So they had published a paper, actually very interesting paper. They had done 80,000 telemedicine consults.
Wow.
Out of which they estimated they saved 55,000 visits to the hospital.
How many?
Out of 80,000. 55,000.
No way.
Out of 80,000 consults. So you did preventive maintenance in 55,000 out of 80,000 people. The other 25,000, you told them to come to the hospital because they obviously needed different kind of care. But as important as that was the fact that they estimated that each person who they saved or did preventive stuff with, if they had to come to the hospital, they would come to Patna, get an attendant with them, spend a night at Patna, and it would cost, their estimate was 2,000 rupees. So when I multiply 50,000 by 2,000, I get to 10 crores. Now, when you think of saving poor rural folk, 10 crores, and these are all telemedicine done at remote villages.
Wow.
You know, and this was just the first sampling that they did. So it's quite amazing what it can do. And not only that, it also creates a job in the village for two people, a man and a woman. Because in India, you know, if I have to take a woman's vitals, she won't let a guy in the village do it. You have to get another lady to do it, right? And they would earn something like 15 to 20,000 rupees a month based on a minimal charge that they would
almost
take
like midwives.
To take care of this. So it's the other thing you got to remember is that, you know, again, India is where I spent a lot of time on healthcare. The government has a very, I won't say effective, but it has a good system which is not effective. So in every village, there's an ASHA worker, there's an Anganwadi worker, and for every 5 or 10 villages or 15 villages, depending on the population, there's an auxiliary nurse midwife.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Wow.
And they have this infrastructure in place. It's just not efficient. So what we are trying to do through another NGO that I work with is try and actually get them efficiently focused on just one issue, which is infant mortality and malnutrition. Okay. So maternal care, basically. And we've done it in Rajasthan. We are doing it in Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh right now. And so hopefully over a period of time, you know, the statistics from Rajasthan are quite amazing. But, you know, the numbers in India are crazy. If you can reduce infant mortality by 50%, you'll save, and I'm talking 0 to 5 year kids, you'll save 1 million lives a year. Right? You think of the impact, that would have. Now, it'll add to your population problem, but it just makes you feel good that you can save, but you'd still lose 1 million lives, which is the other side of the problem.
I mean, population problem, both understand, but it's not a problem. It's the problem we created it. So we should not create that problem. It's like sustainability. We are throwing garbage on the street. We are using plastic. We are doing all that. How can we make someone else responsible? But if we brought somebody to this world, it is collectively every single human's responsibility to do whatever they can. So every single kid has a chance. I mean, you and me both are so passionate about education that every single kid should get education. That should be their right. It should not be a privilege.
So let's say the person who cooks for me in Delhi, drives my car, all the people who work, the gardener, people like that. We said, let's educate their kids the way we'd educate our kids, provided their kids want to get educated.
Sure.
Said, I will educate someone as long as they do well. I'm not going to educate someone who's not interested in getting
Absolutely.
And that has made a real difference. So my driver's daughter, she's working with one of the IT services companies.
Wow.
She married someone there, right? They went to Paris for their honeymoon.
Nice.
So
it must be a proud moment for you, not about her dad, only when you say, wow, that's such an amazing day.
Yeah. So it's quite, it's lovely to see.
Yeah,
and
one
so
kid
we
at
are
a time.
seeing. Yeah. So basically, we said, let's just touch our immediate world. We can change a little bit, that we can control and manage. Yeah. And it's working out really well, and it's very satisfying to see not all of them take advantage of it, but the ones that have taken advantage, you see people being pulled out of poverty and lower middle class to middle class, which is amazing. It just changes the life of the entire family.
So coming back to the health, now I wanted to change it around systematic thinking. So you and me both are big fan of systematic thinking, but when we talk to the outside world, they look at it as it's just another buzzword for IITians. So help me decipher it, because I don't know how to explain it, because it feels like it is in my DNA now, but I can't explain it.
So, if you look back, and I've been thinking about this too, that what did I actually learn at IIT? Mm-hmm. Did I learn, switching circuits, and, I did electronics, AND gates and OR gates and whatever else. Yes, you did. But really your basic learning was how you can take a big problem with multiple variables and I quickly identify the major variables that make a 80-90% impact on the problem. And if you can solve those, then there's a high probability that you'll solve the problem fairly optimally. It won't be the most optimal thing, but fairly optimal. And small problems are not the issue, but problems with multiple variables, I think that's one thing IIT taught us. Mm-hmm. Second thing IIT taught us was to be logical. I think all engineers have that problem. They're considered logical, right?
Too logical sometimes.
The third thing it taught me, at least, was how to survive in a world where there are people smarter than me. And when you go through IIT, your classmates are, most of them are smarter than you. So you have to survive in that environment. Yeah. So I think when I look back, to me, those are the three real learnings I got from IIT. So my wife, actually, I get into trouble with her quite often. She tends to think I'm a computer. Said, why? Because my logic is I only worry about a problem. I worry, but I try to worry about a problem only if my worry can solve the problem or improve the solution to the problem in some way. Otherwise, why worry about it? Think about the alternative solutions to the problem.
True.
Or think about, let's say, some of them are emotional issues. You can still think of what are the solutions to that emotional issue, right? That doesn't gel well with most people. And I find that, And so to that extent, at least I think I'm different. Most people look at it, there's some people who are much more emotional, and yes, it works for them. But that thinking, what you said, structured thinking comes, that I thought all engineers got that. That was what they taught at IIT, basically. When you look back at it, They didn't teach you quarter joint and knuckle joint and whatever else, thermodynamics. They just taught you your way to do structured thinking.
So Arjun, I know it's saying it very easy that big problem, find the small piece which have the 80% impact. Can you talk about a story from your life where so audience can understand what it really means? And pick any problem from your life. You have dealt with thousands of problems like that.
It's very difficult to
pick one.
To think of where you could showcase something like that.
I think
nearly any sales call you go on, any major sales call you go on, ultimately, you have to zero it down to what is the buyer's problem, what is the hot button that you've got to push to make the sale happen, right? And you've got to find a way to, most people think they are selling the equipment, let's say a computer in my case when I was at HCL. I used to always tell my people, you're not selling it, the guy is buying it. You have to find out why he's buying it. If you sold it without knowing why he's buying it, you're going to have an unhappy customer because you don't know why he bought it.
So good question is know his why.
Yeah. And absolutely. And try and there are times when I've actually recommended to prospects that really my machine won't solve it when we had a smaller machine. Go buy a big wax, because that's what you need to solve this kind of problem. And the guy would say, but don't you want to sell your computer? I would always say, I want to sell my computer, but I want to sell it to a customer who will be happy. I don't want to sell it to someone who will be unhappy and it doesn't solve your problem. And that actually has worked really well, because that prospect would come back to me for advice on other things, other stuff that they needed to buy. And so you sort of play a consultant role rather than a salesman role, which really is the ideal way to sell, in a way.
100%.
And so you've got to, when making a sale, you've got to zero in on what is the reason why the person wants to buy. What is the problem I'm going to solve for them? What's the ROI that I'll create, which is a word that I learned later. We didn't know that when I was selling. But
it's a customer.
In a way, yeah.
But knowing his why is more important than selling him your product. And that's so profound. I believe, Arjun, one thing I learned in today's call personally is, we are all in the sales shop. One way or the other, whether we believe it or not, but we are all selling something. Internally, externally, whatever. Even to our kids. We are selling them our idea, we are selling them our ideology, we are selling them what we have learned. So they can learn and they can go and they can do better than all of us. We want next generation to do better than us. So the biggest thing I learned is know their why. Because once you understand why the customer wants to buy your product, why this customer need your product, the conversation changes. You can find the right customer, because you may be spending time with the customers who doesn't need your services. So defining why is everything. And that, I believe, should be the mantra for every single entrepreneur.
Why does the market need your product? Why does the customer need it in the first place? Yes, absolutely. What problem does it solve for them? And how important is that problem for them? Is it need-based? Do you have to sell it? If it's need-based, then you present it differently. If it's a luxury kind of thing that nice to have, then you position it differently.
It's a different target, different demographic. When you were talking about AR, VR, I wanted to mention that I just found out Microsoft got $22 billion contract from US Army for HoloLens. And I'm still not able to fathom, because we have used HoloLens, it's a brilliant device, but still I'm not able to comprehend the $22 billion price tag. So since we are talking about the future, we are talking about technology. What do you think about technology like HoloLens in future is specific to healthcare?
So healthcare has one big kind of stumbling block, and that is doctors. see, doctors today their experience makes them a better doctor.
Yeah.
Right. Now, experience comes from meeting more and more patients.
True.
My experience when I go with technology, and again, this is from India, is that doctors below the age of 35 take it immediately. 35 to 55, Indian numbers, is a 50-50. Right. And above 55 is a close to 0%. He wants any technology.
Yeah, he doesn't believe in time.
He doesn't think he wants to adapt or whatever.
True. I
think that the age range might be different in the US. 35 might be 45 or whatever. But that's true. And they are the doctors, because they are a critical part of the healthcare ecosystem. They have to adapt. They have to adjust. They have to accept newer things. They will. How quickly, how slowly. And this is not true in just medicine. It's true in education. It's true in publishing. It's true in a lot of areas, right? Where the rate of adoption is a lot slower than what we think would happen. Mm-hmm. Right. And again, so you have to be, now education, courtesy this lockdown, suddenly you're going to get a big boost on online education.
Sure.
What would have taken 5-7 years will now take 2-3 years. Right. Telemedicine is the same thing. What would have taken X years will now take much less than X.
Much less. I mean, we are trying that for 20 years. Yeah.
And what that will do is a lot of medical devices, wearable devices, etc., are going to hit the market. I mean, already you can do blood tests on site. You have non-intrusive glucometers. You have all that stuff, and it's happening very quickly. Yeah. In fact, there are a couple of companies who have a AI software where when you look at your face on the phone, they'll do an analysis of your medical thing and send it out to the doctor. And some of them have applied for FDA approval, so that they want FDA to say that their clinical response is acceptable for the doctor to take a decision. So, it's happening. Whether FDA will clear it or not, I don't know. But it's there.
So, if I ask you to predict 25 years from now, and let's talk about only healthcare, because 3 or 4 years, it's interesting. We all can visualize it. I consider you futurist. I believe all of our audience consider you futurist. What do you think life of an average Joe, how will it be? And when we talk specifically about health, because I know we can't predict everything and we can't cover everything in this segment, just about health. How will that be? Any thoughts, any ideas?
So let me, when I first got the computer home in India, my daughter was 3 years old. She's now 46. So you can, So my mother was there and she said, in her lifetime, she's seen the telephone, the radio, the television, and now the computer coming to the house. And so she said, when my daughter, that's her granddaughter, was her age, what would be in the house?
Yes.
And my answer to her at that time, my answer to her at that time was, if I knew I wouldn't be working, I'd actually go and write a book and probably, make my millions, so to say. Now, what will be in 25 years, from a healthcare point of view, is first thing that I think everyone will be, first of all, it will be personalized medicine based on your DNA, right? So you're back to the old Ayurvedic kind of thing, which was done differently. They tried to know you as a person and then give you the right medicine that worked for you in a very slow process. It'll be done a lot quicker now because your DNA will be available and your medicine. And what you're seeing in the RNA vaccine, you're going to see that work much more efficiently. Because the RNA vaccine is a general vaccine that goes and improves your T cells, so to say, so they fight the disease. Yeah. You're going to see a vaccine made for each specific person. So there'll be a specific vaccine for me, there'll be a specific vaccine for you. that'll take care of your specific issues. I think that's one thing you're going to see in medicine.
Yeah.
The second thing you're going to see is you'll have transplants for not nearly, I think for every organ you can think of. I think you'll see the brain might be the last one that will get transplanted, but you will see a lot more. I won't say we'll know exactly how the brain works, but we'll have a lot more progress on how the brain can work, does work, so that, you'll also see, how should I put it, everyone's monitored all the time. So there'll be systems that will be monitoring you all the time, which will give an alarm. Like you're saying, hey, your car tells the mechanic, tells you when it's going to fail in a mechanic. You see that in human beings, right? Similar kind of stuff, so that your doctor knows before you're going to have a stroke that you're high potential, take this action or whatever, or get him rushed to the hospital, whatever, right? You're also going to see, I think, in a way, medical care will change because of the way transportation is done today. You've got helicopters going to the top of some hospitals to transport people, but you're already seeing flying taxis, if I use that term, door to door. You're seeing drones delivering packages. You're going to see patients getting delivered to hospitals in a much more efficient way, rather than having big helicopters. You should be able to pick them up by unmanned vehicles and get them to hospital, right? So I think when you look at it, that's really, and everything will be wearable. All your monitoring will be done through wearables.
On one note, I love what you're saying, and with the speed technology is moving, I really want it to go further. But on the second note, I'm skeptical. In 25 years, a world has changed. A lot of things has changed. This conversation you and me are having, I never thought 25 years ago, not too far ago, just 25 years ago, it's even possible in my lifetime.
Yes, but you read science fiction. In fact, I want to mention Asimov. He wrote many years ago. He wrote 2 series. One was called I, Robot, and one was the Robot series. There are 3 books in the Robot series. If you read the second book, Nature's Son, I think it is. That's the name.
I'll check it out. I haven't read it.
He talks about how people are living away from each other, and robots are taking care of all their needs.
Nice,
Read it, because I think in a way that has a lot of ideas that are going to come up in the post-COVID world. And so people with imagination have been able to do some level of prediction. Maybe when we read it, or when he wrote it, people thought he was crazy. It's becoming reality today. And the other thing that we haven't factored in, that I haven't factored in, is the impact of nanotechnology on everything that we do. In fact, I would think the way we'll end up fighting cancer is that we'll take a little nano cell, inject it into your body. It'll have a camera, so you'll be able to send it to the cancer cell, the specific cell you want to destroy. It'll destroy that cell and get absorbed in the body. So it's biodegradable. Instead of doing chemotherapy where you kill good cells and bad cells, you'll kill the specific cancer cells by using nano cameras, nano particles that'll get injected. I think I've seen it in a movie. I forget the movie. It was a Raquel Welch movie where they showed this. I know, but I think it'll become reality.
So Arjun, I definitely, it's again my belief. I do agree with that vision. Agree in the sense is I can comprehend it. It's not agree because we don't know. We both are speculating in a way, but I believe the way robots are being projected in the movies, the size and the task they are doing is not going to be the task they'll be performing. I do agree with do understand the value of bringing it to nanotech. So we have these nanobots or nanorobots doing very, very small, tiny tasks for us, and their purpose is only one thing, not million things. The challenge is the whole world look at the robot as if there is a human doing 1 million tasks for us. And that is where the disconnect I have with everybody who's talking about robots. I'm completely in sync with you. And that's a phenomenal opportunity for our audience and the listeners, that find smallest piece of the problem, which a lot of people have, and just solve it to the nth level, whether it is nanobots or something else, including the personalized medicine, what Arjun talks about. That's a phenomenal opportunity in itself. If we can do that, Arjun, I think we will make illness optional just by personalizing health for everyone. Don't you think?
And the other thing I worry about is that people are going to live to 120, 125. But you have to tone your body to be able to stay active that long. You don't want to live to 125 and your muscles start failing when you're 80 or 90, as they do today for most people. You're going to have a really bad last 20 years, So your point on robots, I've got to tell you a short. When I came here in 85, I got my son here. He was 9 or 10 years old, and a little less than that. But for him, robots were these transformers and all that stuff. So I thought I'd show him a robot, and so we went to the GM factory at Framingham near Boston, where robotic things paint the cars and build and all that. He walked through the whole factory with his eyes closed, because that wasn't his concept of a robot. His concept was a humanoid type robot walking around. Yeah, not these machines coming and doing things. I still remember he didn't open his eyes through that factory walk, because he couldn't believe that this is what he wanted. He didn't want to change his perception of what a robot was. And so I think a lot of people still have that perception. That's a humanoid type of thing, which is, which people make and show, and that's what comes on WhatsApp and some of these things. But most robots are just like they're computers and machines with AI, stuff like that.
We'll continue to do smaller tasks for us, but we will have too many of those, and that's how we will change and improvise things for us. And hopefully we will get to this nanobot technology to a level where you and me can get it programmed for whatever we need, including specific muscle, that what is really happening, and it can repair it. Like I love hiking, and I can definitely use something so I know exactly what part of my body is overused or underused, and I can manage it effectively. Today I can't, because I don't have any data. I just try based on what I know about my body. Arjun, I can continue. Sorry.
Yeah. I wanted to add one more thing. On the other side, I also think that somewhere we will learn more and get a better appreciation of some of the old Indian concepts of yoga and stuff, where the mind can control the body, can control a lot of things. And I think we will learn a lot more about that. I see even in Western scientific thought with a lot of people, forget all the thing about everything we knew in the past and India has done everything beforehand. I mean, forget all that stuff. But, they did do some stuff that was really, really good in India without all this equipment. They were able to show how the mind can control the body, meditation, etc., etc. I think you're going to see some of that come in and start playing a role, a more active role and a more acceptable role than we are seeing today. And that I think will be really good, because ultimately, if you can use your own body to make your muscles and do your exercise instead of using equipment and stuff, that will help you wherever you are, in that sense. So I think you will see a lot more acceptability, and therefore a lot more of that coming in. You will see a lot more things like meditation, stuff like that, which will become part of everyone's life in terms of how they manage their stress and stuff like that. So yeah, it's going to be interesting, because you're going to see this great fusion, or the start of the fusion of Western scientific thought and Eastern spiritualism that will come together, which will, I think, be a great combination.
No, Arjun, this is absolutely phenomenal, and I'm thinking through this, trying to put into so our Western friends can understand that. So it is very similar, if I'm not wrong. So you are talking about mind-body connection. We always talk about mind-body connection. Everybody sees it, but it's almost like Ramanujan. When he was in the college, when professor used to ask him that how did he solve this theorem, he said the goddess came in his dreams and solved it, because he didn't have those steps, but he could understand it without going through that process. So as a society, we are on that journey to understand that how this mind-body connection work at the atomic or subatomic level. And that understanding, I believe, will give us better health, of course, but we may be able to create even better society, because we both know mental wellness is the biggest disease today. I mean, I'm seeing it, it's so phenomenal. It's unbelievable how bad it is right now.
Yeah, and I think what has given it a big impetus in my mind was a year or so ago, the Nobel Prize for Medicine went to this Chinese doctor who had taken a chemical from a plant that they used in the ancient times to help cure malaria, and actually use that as a cure for malaria, which actually got patented and worked. And so it's a 2,000-3,000 year old cure that was done, and the chemical was in that plant. Right. Now, they didn't know that, but they knew the plant would cure. And so he or she, I forget who, was able to identify that chemical, and she got the person got the Nobel Prize for medicine for doing that. So that just shows you that, look, you can't foo-foo all this old stuff. You can't also say that that was the only thing and nothing else. But you've got to look at it, and I think you'll find a much more open society. You already see it. When I came here to the US 30 odd years ago, we had bookstores for metaphysics. That's gone away. I don't see any metaphysics bookstores anymore. We also said this, nothing is faster than the speed of light. Right, and that's been the standard theory. And now they are talking about particles that have been separated being connected by a consciousness, which is sort of instantaneous, right? Which is obviously faster than the speed of light. So you're starting to see some of these concepts start coming up. They're not yet fully accepted, but as soon as we get some proof, of what it is, you see the phenomena, but you don't know. It's like the muons right now that they're talking about. They don't know what it is, but they think it's going to challenge the standard theory that Einstein and all had. And so, things are moving. Ultimately, everyone wants to go after the truth, which is important.
There is a lot for humans to discover, Arjun. I want to thank you very much for your time. You are really generous. You are with me for more than an hour. I'm sure my friends and audience must be loving this show. Thank you very much. And
thanks.
I'm really looking forward for another interesting conversation with you in future, maybe in few months, whenever you have a little bit more time.
Sure. Thanks.